In this video, I'm going to be turning a small storage closet in my house into a gun closet. Originally, when the house was built, this closet was a furnace closet, and at some point before we bought the house, the furnace was removed from this closet, put into the attic space above, and this was converted just into a normal small storage closet. To start with, I'm going to remove a couple of items I have stored in here, and then I'm going to uninstall the shelving unit that's in here as well. What? Now I'm going to remove the closet door so I don't have to deal with it while working in the closet. I also want to replace this door. Since this is a hollow core door, I'm going to end up replacing it with a solid core door to have some extra security for the gun closet. Now, I'm not typically a fan of using beadboard in any of my projects because it's a pretty rough piece of wood to work with. But because the closet used to have a furnace in it, the finishing job on the drywall is pretty rough. Probably between a level 3 and a level 4, with level 4 being generous. It's pretty rough in there, but I'd say it's got a bit more coverage than what level 3 typically provides on the taping. Since the drywall looks so rough, I'm going to use the beadboard to panel all the walls in the closet. Now, because the beadboard is also pretty rough to the touch as well, I'm going to sand it really well and sand it up to at least 220 grit. I did consider going above that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be in a closet. I'm not going to be staring at it and touching it all day, so it really doesn't need to be any smoother than 220. Typically, beadboard is hung with the bead going vertical. I decided to hang it with the bead going horizontal. The first reason I decided to have the bead go horizontal is the room is pretty small. It's only 3 by 3, but with 9-foot ceilings. So I figured if the bead went vertical, it would draw your eyes upward and make the room feel even more narrow and the ceiling feel even higher. My second reason for having the bead go horizontal is there are some companies out there that specialize in gun closet and gun room organization, and some of the products they sell are metal panels that have slots cut into them to allow you to have different brackets and shelving supports to hold all your gun stuff. While I liked the customization ability that the metal panels provided, they're not really meant for a space this small, so using the beadboard and having it hung up horizontally was my best way to kind of mimic the visual look of those metal panels. To attach the beadboard to the walls, I used 1.25" long brag nails along the edges to hit the corner studs, going 1 nail for every 3 rows. After securing the edges, I came back to hit the stud in the center. Now, this stud was different on each wall, so I had to determine its location before hanging the beadboard by using a stud finder, and then transfer that location onto the surface of the beadboard and then hit it with my nail, again going 1 every 3 rows. Most of the beadboard panels were pretty easy to cut to fit, despite the fact that the walls were not particularly square. However, one board ended up needing a little bit extra work because it needed to go over a light switch, so I had to cut the light switch opening out for it. To do this, I measured and marked where my light switch needed to go, and then I drilled a 1/2" hole right into the center of it. Then I came back with my jigsaw and carefully cut right to the edges of the area that I had marked for removal. After all the beadboard was attached, I covered up all the brad nail holes using wood putty, and then I primed and painted it using a color called Camelback from Sherwin-Williams. With the beadboard done, I was ready to start working on the shelves. I really lucked out on this part of the project because I didn't have to go buy anything to do the shelves. I ended up having enough good sized pieces of 3/4 inch plywood on hand to be able to build the shelves without even having to cut anything to width. All I had to do was cut it down to length to be able to fit properly in the closet. I decided I wanted a total of 4 shelves in the closet, all along the back wall. I didn't want any shelves along the sides simply because it's not very wide, and it would have been too narrow having shelves along there and then having to step into the closet to get anything. My goal was to have 1 foot of space between each shelf. So the last shelf would be 4 feet off of the ground, and that shelf would technically not be a normal storage shelf. That would be the bottom support of the rifle and shotgun rack. For the barrel support for the rifle and shotgun rack, I managed to find a board in the garage that was about 7.5 inches wide by about 50 inches long. So the first thing I needed to do was cut it down the length. I needed the support to be 4 inches deep, so I was going to have to cut the board roughly in half to be able to do this. But before I could do that, I needed to mark the location of where each of the barrel holes was going to go. Each barrel opening needed to be 2 inches wide and have a 1-inch gap before the next barrel opening. So each line needed to be 3 inches on center. Because of the overall length of the board, this meant I was able to get 10 holes total, leaving an 1.5 inch gap on each end before the first opening on their respective sides. To start with, I drilled a smaller pilot hole, and then I came back with the hole saw. This made sure that I had more stability when I started using the hole saw so that I didn't end up slipping and end up screwing up all the spacing between each of the holes. This is pretty important because I need that amount of space for each of the guns. My final step for this board was to cut the board right down the center of the holes. Then once the board was basically cut in half, I just needed to go and sand the holes to clean them up a bit because the wood was a little bit rough. Next, I started working on the bottom support for the rifle and shotgun rack. This support is basically 2 shelves that are going to be combined into one, with the bottom part of the shelf being 11 inches deep and the top part being 5.5 inches deep. The bottom part is where the buttstock of the weapon rests on, and the top part helps prevent that buttstock from being pushed too close to the wall. Since the weapon needs to be able to maintain a proper angle to keep the barrel resting into the barrel support up top, this makes sure that the weapon can't fall away from the wall and fall onto the ground. I decided to use my router with a roundover bit to route the edge of the top part of this shelf, meaning the 5.5 inch deep part. I did this so that while putting a weapon in, the buttstock wouldn't be able to hit that squared edge and dent it. With a rounded over edge, is a lot less likely to have that problem. And then to combine the 2 pieces into a single shelf, I simply used wood glue and glued the top part down to the bottom piece, and then I came back once everything was clamped down in place and shot some brad nails into it. And of course I then came back and covered up those holes with wood putty. Since there's only one stud in the center of each of the walls and I couldn't guarantee that I could hit the corner studs, I decided that the only way to mount the shelves in the closet was to use some shelf supports. So for these supports I decided to use 1x2s, and so I had to cut a whole bunch of them to size to be able to do this. I also cut one additional 1x2 to attach to the front edge of the rifle support shelf. And then to reduce the risk of damaging the edges of the 1x2, I went ahead and used the roundover bit to round over both top edges of that board as well. Once I painted all my shelves and support pieces, I was ready to install them. So to start with, I needed to pre-drill the holes for the stud locations in all of my support pieces. I started with the bottom shelf, attaching the back support to the wall first. It's really important to pre-drill with these 1x2s because the wood is so soft, it's pretty easy to split it. To attach the supports into the center studs on each of the walls, I use a 2.5 inch long cabinet screw. I'm pretty fond of using any screws that have pan-shaped heads because I like having the visual aesthetic of the screw sitting on the surface and not overdriving into the wood itself. After ensuring that the back support was level, I went to attach the support on the left hand side. To connect the left and right hand supports to the back support, I used some right angled strong ties using 1.25 inch long cabinet screws to secure them. I spray painted these strong ties black before installing them because I didn't think galvanized steel was going to look good in the closet since nothing else was going to have that color. I should mention that I accidentally missed the stud on the left and right support for this first shelf. The reason for that is that when I measured and then pre-drilled for that hole location, I forgot to take into account that the entire thing would be shifted forward based off of the back support being an extra 3/4 inch thick. So I missed each of the studs by 3/4 inch and then had to come back later on and fix it to make sure that my screw actually went into a stud. My last step for the left and right supports was to put a screw about 1 inch from each of their ends, and this helped secure it and suck it tight to the beadboard. I then essentially repeated the same process for all the shelves that remained, including the barrel support shelf. My goal was to have each shelf have about 12 inches of gap between them, so that the fourth shelf, which would have the rifles, would be able to be about 4 feet off of the ground. Unfortunately, this didn't quite work out because when I got to the third shelf, the left hand support was going to end up hitting the light switch if I went with a 12 inch gap. And if I went above the light switch, I'd end up around like 16 inches. So ultimately, I decided to have it stay below the light switch so that the rifle shelf wouldn't have to be pushed any higher, and this gave me only about a 10-inch gap between shelf 2 and 3. When I attached the barrel support shelf, I initially only had the back support 1x2 there, but ultimately I didn't like how that looked, so I came back and added left and right supports so it matched all the other shelves in the closet as well. To protect the shelves from being scratched up by gun cases or buttstocks or anything else I put in the gun closet, I decided to add some shelf liner. In this particular case, this is nothing more than toolbox shelf liner, so you can pick this up at Home Depot or Lowe's or pretty much any hardware store. In a previous video, I showed how to cut the door hinges, deadbolt hole, and the air vents that I'm installing in this solid core door for this project. So if you want to see that video, I'll make sure to include a link for it. As I mentioned earlier, I decided to replace the hollow core door that was initially on this closet and replace it with a solid core door. And as part of that, I wanted to have some air vents in this solid core door because I need some better airflow into that closet to keep the humidity under control. Anybody who owns guns knows that higher humidity will cause your guns to rust. In this particular case, this closet is a little more susceptible to it because the back wall is right against the fireplace. I don't think there's any insulation, honestly, behind that wall. And then right above it is the attic space where the furnace was moved to. So I've always noticed that this closet is a little bit warmer, a little more humid than other ones in the house. Why don't you get those screws? Hey, give me those. Give me that. Give me that back. Since I replaced the hollow core door with a solid core door for security purposes, I also replaced the original hinges with security hinges. If you don't know what a security hinge is, it's basically just a hinge where the hinge pin is locked into place so it can't be tapped out by a hammer, and this makes it so that for doors where the hinge is visible, like in this case, you can't just easily go up and knock the hinge pin out and then remove the door even if the door is locked. So in this particular situation, you have to be able to unlock the door to get it open. Since this is a gun closet, it obviously needs a lock on it, and I could have gone with just a normal deadbolt, but I decided to go with a keypad entry deadbolt because it's just a little bit more cool and fun. Installing this keypad deadbolt is really quite easy. First, you just need to install the latch into the door, then take the keypad and run the wire underneath the deadbolt latch, then take the key cylinder and run the tailpiece through the latch, then take the mounting plate and make sure the wire runs through the plate, and then add your screws to secure the keypad to the mounting plate. As you tighten the screws down on the inside of the door, you need to make sure that the keypad stays nice and level, otherwise it will end up lopsided. Before adding the receiver assembly, you need to identify if the door is left-handed or right-handed. That's simple based off of where the hinges are. If they're on the left side of the door, it's a left-handed door. Hinges are on the right side of the door, it's a right-handed door. Once you identify if you have a left or right-handed door, you need to rotate the thumb piece on the receiver assembly to the left for right-handed doors and to the right for left-handed doors. Or it simply needs to point to the hinges when the door is unlocked. From there, you just need to use the screws provided to secure the receiver assembly to the door and the mounting plate, and then just add your batteries and then go through the process for programming your keypad. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to click the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time on the DIY Grunt.